Hi everybody, it's Richard here again and welcome to another video. This one is, I got the idea for doing this video from watching YouTube and seeing some of these videos where such and such a person hears a certain classic song for the first time and getting their reaction. Now I think a lot of this put on, to be quite honest with you, because if nobody's ever heard Bohemian Rhapsody before and they're in their 20s, I just don't understand. But they seem to get an awful lot of views, and I thought, right, could I actually create 4 EPs, one from the 1960s, one from the 70s, one from the 80s, and one from the 90s, that reflect my taste in music, as well as actually reflecting what was actually popular in those decades. So obviously I can't pick, say, 4 heavy metal songs for the 80s, because one, it's not a good reflection of the 80s in general, and 2, I'm not a big heavy metal fan. And this was probably the most difficult video I have ever done, and I'm not 100% happy with it, but it's as near as I'll get, you know, especially the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. I think the 80s was actually the most important or most difficult one to do. But anyway, we'll start and I'll show LPs and I'll pick the song which will feature on each EP, and this is for people that have never heard popular music in any of those 4 decades. A little bit like the Yesterday scenario, you know, the film about the Beatles, that nobody has recognised the Beatles. Well, nobody has recognised pop music, and it's up to me to create 4 EPs to show people what music was like in those decades. So we'll start off with the 1960s, and probably one more thing before I start, I'm not going to include David Bowie in this, because I think he goes beyond each decade. I know the 70s was his main one, but you know, I could pick a David Bowie song for every decade, so I decided not to pick any at all. Also, I'm only allowing one artist, one song, and that's it. So to start off with the 1960s, and I couldn't not pick the Beatles, and the song I would pick for the EP would actually be She Loves You, because that's the one that really started off the Beatlemania as such. Okay, it was I Want to Hold Your Hand in America, and I know From Me to You got to #1, but She Loves You was a real big one, and I think they did change the course of music, the Beatles, because the music 62, 61, after rock and roll, basically after Elvis went into the army, it died, and these were the guys that resurrected it. So the Beatles would get on that 1960s EP with She Loves You. Next up, and a little bit of Motown, I think is very important to be represented in the 60s. And no better way than the Supremes, and the song I would choose is Baby Love. It's one of the best singles of the 60s, and it's one of the best singles ever. It's a fantastic song. I do love the Supremes, and you know, you can't bypass the 60s without Motown. So the Supremes and Baby Love would be my second choice for the 60s. Third, a little bit of folk rock, and this is the one that I was going to pick Bob Dylan, but I decided the best song to pick actually would have been Simon and Garfunkel's Sounds of Silence, because I think that takes in everything to do with folk rock. I know that whenever they recorded it just as an acoustic version, and whenever they were away, the Columbia engineers or whoever it was added backing instruments to it. But it's turned out into be a real iconic song, and the lyrics are fantastic, and this is my third choice for the 1960s. And the last choice for the 60s, and a little bit of psych, and I'm going to go with The Byrds and 8 Miles High. It's one of the first psychedelic songs, and it's one of the best. It's from their third album, Fifth Dimension. I know it was co-written by Gene Clark, who had left the band at this time, but it's an absolute fantastic song. So that would get the fourth choice for the 60s EP. Now I think I would lead the whole of that EP off with She Loves You, because that's what really started music up again. So that's my 60s EP. Going on to my 70s EP, and a bit of glam rock has to be included. And I'm going to go with TRex, and I still haven't made my mind up which one. I'm going to pick Metal Guru because probably it's the most glam sounding, a #1 hit for Mark Bolan from his Slider album. Most of these albums I'll show would be greatest hits. I just thought I would show the hits albums unless I don't have them. There will be one single shown, by the way, because it wasn't on an LP. So Metal Guru represents the glam part of the 1970s for me. Also there's the punk in the 1970s, and you have to go with the Sex Pistols. This is flogging a dead horse. And the one I would go for the Sex Pistols is Pretty Vacant, with that fantastic intro. All 4 singles from Nevermind the Bollocks are wonderful. The whole album is iconic, it's brilliant, but I think I would just go for Pretty Vacant. It just gets there ahead of the post first. So yeah, that's my second choice for the 70s, and that represents punk. Third, disco, and I was very close to picking I Feel Love, but that's a little bit more than disco for me. That's a little bit futuristic, and I'm going to go with the Bee Gees and Staying Alive. This is a fantastic album. This is their disco greatest hits. Staying Alive from the film Saturday Night Fever. Really iconic song, absolutely brilliant. I love it, and I could have picked any of theirs, like You Should Be Dancing, or even Tragedy or something like that there, but I still think, or Night Fever, but I still think Staying Alive, I nearly forgot the title there, is probably the best. So that would be the third pick for the 70s EP. And lastly, I hemmed and hawed about this, and I thought, well, what other genre? And during the 70s, the sort of heavy rock came in with Led Zeppelin. I know they started in the 60s, but the one I'm going to pick is Deep Purple, and yes, I'm going to go with Smoke on the Water. I absolutely adore that riff. I just love it. So this would get slightly ahead of Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin onto the 1970s EP. So that's the 4 for the 70s, and the lead off track I think is going to be the Sex Pistols' Pretty Vacant. So we go into the 80s. Excuse me. So we go into the 80s, and I'm going to pick from Fine Young Cannibals the absolutely fantastic She Drives Me Crazy, which is that very heavy 80s produced, almost tinny sound, but I still love it. It's around 1989, it's the end of the 80s, and it's probably around the worst production you can get, but it's a fantastic song, and it's a really good representative of music at that time, and I love it. So Fine Young Cannibals, She Drives Me Crazy is getting on my 80s EP. New Romantics at the start of the 80s, and there was quite a few to pick from, but I decided to go with Visage and Fade to Grey. I think it's from 1980. I think it's probably one of the best New Romantic songs that there is. I remember it coming out, loved it. Actually like this group, so do I think they had fantastic singles. But Visage, Fade to Grey, co-written by Midge Ure, and that would get my second choice of the 80s. Now my third choice of the 80s is a single, and I'm going to have to pick This Charming Man by the Smiths, and this is like the indie, almost glum rock representative of the 80s, and I think this was, the Smiths were the band of the 80s for me, and maybe I don't listen to them quite as much as I used to, but I still appreciate everything they did, and I can still remember hearing this for the first time, and I couldn't believe how good it was, and I wish I had bought about 5 copies, because this single is quite expensive to get now. But I played this to death. I almost took some of the blackness off the vinyl, I played it that much. So that's my third choice of This Charming Man. And the fourth choice is a bit of a cheat, because it's actually 2 songs, but I'm going to call it one song. Now, there is a bit of a sort of a almost soft rock in the 1980s with bands like Dire Straits, but there's a guy that sounded just like Dire Straits, and I actually thought he was very, very good, and I'm going to go with Chris Rea's The Road to Hell. Now, I'm going to include The Road to Hell Part 1 and The Road to Hell Part 2. They're 2 different songs, but they're merged together. Now, each one on its own is okay, but merged together is an absolutely fantastic piece of work. The first part is a very, very bluesy, almost gothic feel to it, and then the second part is more your sort of Dire Straits pop song. But and it was the second part that was the hit single. But I'm going to say Road to Hell as my fourth choice, and it's a long one then, because it's 9 minutes long, but it gets on. And the song to lead off that EP would be The Smiths' This Charming Man. Okay, the 90s. Now, I'm not as big into the 90s as any of the other decades, but I've still got 4 I can show. The first one is going to be Britpop, and probably the best Britpop single for me is Common People by Pulp. This is brilliant. You know, you can say, okay, this is a throwback to the 70s and early 80s, but I think all Britpop was a throwback to something, because Oasis were a throwback to Slade and the Beatles. Blur was a throwback to like Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel and the Kinks. I'm not too sure who these were a throwback to, because they were going since the early 80s anyway, but it's a fantastic song and one of the best songs of the 90s. So Common People would be my choice. Second of the 90s and American rock really, and I'm going to pick R.E.M. and I'm going to go for the more sort of folky Losing My Religion, which I think is a fantastic song still. I did get fed up with it after a while, but I've played it recently and I absolutely love it, and I think it's a good representation of the early 90s, when these guys were probably the biggest band in the world. And the next 2 are going to be CDs, and this is maybe a little bit of a surprise, but I do like that sort of a smooth soul, sort of lounge soul music, and I'm going to pick The Lighthouse Family, and the song, the title track of this, Ocean Drive. I think it's magnificent. I absolutely adore this song. I couldn't find the greatest hits, so I'll just show the original CD album. I would love this on vinyl, but unfortunately I don't have it. So that's Ocean Drive by The Lighthouse Family. And finally, the 4th song is from Radiohead, and I was going to pick Fake Plastic Trees, but I decided to go with Street Spirit Fade Out, and that would be the closer of the EP. I don't know how to group these guys. They weren't Britpop. They were, I think they were closer to bands like Pink Floyd than they were to bands like Oasis. But I know the first 3, 4 Radiohead albums, and after that I sort of gave up on them, so I'm not too familiar with anything after Kid A. So that's Street Spirit Fade Out is my 4th of the 90s. And the song to lead the EP would be Pulp's Common People. So that's 4 EPs from music from 4 different decades. I think it's a good representation of my music. I hope it's a half decent representation of music in general. And I would wonder if people hadn't heard these songs before, what they would actually think of them. So okay, I hope you enjoyed that. That's me for now, and I hope to have another video quite soon. Okay, all the best now. Bye bye.